hey, Fellowship family, welcome back to this episode of the Deeper Podcast, where we are in our final episode of the Minor Prophets. Oh my goodness. We are here. It's the end of the year. It's post-Christmas. And joined this week by Amy. Welcome. And Liam.
What's up?
Liam, you're preaching this weekend.
Yep. Terrifying, right?
Brother Liam.
No, it was good. And I guess a little behind the curtain, we're doing a double podcast recording. So today I did a run through for the Zechariah message. You did a run through for Malachi, and then we're recording for the Zechariah podcast and then the Malachi podcast, so we can get a little bit of break around
and
Christmas time.
I have heard these two guys' voices a lot.
Too much.
Yeah, it's been too much. So sorry for you, Amy.
No, it's been delightful.
For those listening. One announcement. We are going to be taking a break next week. We're going to take a 1 week break because the office is kind of closed. A lot of us are out. And so we'll take a 1 week break for the first week of our Heaven series, which I am really actually disappointed about that because I'm really looking forward to the Heaven series, which will be what we're doing the first week in January. But then we'll be back for week 2 and pick things back up then. So just a 1 week break. It's not 400 years of silence. It's just 1 week of silence.
Good.
That's a little throw into Malachi that we're going to hear about in a second. But as usual, send your questions, thoughts, stories, emails to deeper@fbctopeka.com. Okay, hope everybody had a great Christmas. With that, we're going to hand it off to our quick question of the day.
Yeah, for quick question of the day, are you New Year's resolution or word of the year type people?
Resolution, yes. Word, no.
Okay.
Resolution, no. Word, yes.
Oh.
Amy, what are you?
More of a word person just because everybody else does it and then they ask me and then I have to just have something.
Yep.
I'm not a huge resolution person, except I have been for a while now doing the Bible through the year in different ways. So
cool. Yeah, that was like the first resolution after becoming a Christian, like the fall of 2015. Like that January, I went to a conference and heard a message on reading the Bible all the way through. I was like, okay, this year I'm going to read the whole thing. And I did. So that was one resolution.
From Genesis to Revelation? Or did you do kind of the chronological?
No, straight Genesis to Revelation.
Nice. Was there if you remember, was there a point where you're like, oh man, I got to really push through? Or were you like, no, this is good?
Chronicles for sure. The genealogies are a doozy. I thought Leviticus was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Because I had never spent any time reading any of the laws.
Some of it's bizarre.
Super bizarre. Yeah. But there's nothing harder to read than endless genealogies, in my opinion.
Same. When I get to Chronicles, I'm
that's tough.
Okay.
That's tough. Yeah. And so interesting little factoid that I learned about Chronicles is actually in kind of the Jewish combining of the Old Testament. That's last in their Old Testament.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so they put that last before the New Testament, which is just an interesting little factoid.
And what's the rationale for that?
So it's kind of, Chronicles does a lot of like retelling of a lot of things that happens in Kings. And so whereas we kind of have the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, the law, and then kind of the prophets. So, and we have kind of this history and prophet breakdown. They don't really make that many distinctions. And so the prophets and the writings is kind of a summary of all the historical and the prophetic books together. And so it's a little bit more chronological in that regard.
Well, and then also all the minor prophets were on one scroll.
Yeah,
it
that's
was
crazy.
One book.
Some of them are pretty short though.
Well, yeah, true. But I mean, we've been 12 separate messages and sermons and stuff, and they would just be like, yeah, this is one message. And like, okay, I hear you.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's like the history of Israel kind of like hits a stopping point at the end of Chronicles, and then it kind of picks back up. But then Malachi is kind of hey, here's the prophetic end.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell us about Malachi then.
Yeah.
There's so many interesting things about it. So like I kind of said, it is the final prophetic word of God in the Old Testament before what is typically called the silent era, which is 400 years between Malachi to Matthew, or the first, announcement of Jesus' birth in Revelation. there at the coming of Christ. So this book sits at a pretty significant spot in the history of the Old Testament and in Jewish tradition, because the name Malachi means like my messenger. And so you can kind of in some ways see this book as the message of God to the people, and what is God's last words going to be before he's quiet for 400 years. So that's kind of like the setting the stage. The people had been back from exile for about 100 years. The temple had been rebuilt. The walls had been rebuilt. He's probably, most scholars see Malachi as a contemporary of Ezra and Nehemiah, so kind of around a similar time period. And what's happening in this book is God is coming to confront the people in 6 arguments. That's kind of how the book is broken down, is 6 arguments back and forth that God has with the people, of God saying, you have done this or you have said this, and the people responding in a lot of ways kind of childlike in their responses, and not in a good way. And so it's this kind of ongoing confrontation between God and his people as the last word of prophecy in the Old Testament. So that's kind of where we're at in the overarching message.
Okay, so where some of our questions are going to involve this word doubt.
Yeah.
And I think with a word like doubt, you often can come in with like a preconceived meaning of it and kind of assumptions with it. So as we ask some questions around doubting, can you, Liam and Amy, just give some clarity to what do we mean when we are talking about doubt? And then also, how do you see that playing in with Malachi?
Yeah. What do you think how would you define the word doubt?
Well, I think of like, you're just in a state of questioning something. So when we looked it up, it's just a lack of certainty or conviction. And so like you just aren't solid on something. You're left unsettled.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that makes sense when you're looking at any of this stuff. They're unsettled about something, and so they're going to have to lean one way or another.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and this like starts the book. Doubt is right at the beginning of the book, in the hearts and the minds of the people, because the first thing that God says to them is, I love you. I have loved you. And their immediate response is very clearly a lack of certainty of that truth when they say like, oh, well, how have you loved us? And that doubt kind of just bleeds into the rest of the book and the people's responses to God, their worship. And it's like all of the things that we talk about in the message of what that doubt leads to there. But it kind of begins with that lack of certainty or conviction in that God really does love his people.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the core starting point of the message.
Okay, so that's where the people of Israel are at. But I think that same question is things that we ask as well. So when you think about that, what has caused or what causes you to doubt God's love?
Got anything that comes to mind?
I think it's when I'm not understanding his timing or his methods or his ways, like things aren't making sense what or how he's doing something. It may cause me to question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for the people in Malachi, they didn't see their circumstances like going super well. They felt like and heard in the prophets like, hey, if you rebuild the temple and change of hearts and do all these things, you're going to experience prosperity, you're going to experience blessing and all of these things from the Lord. And they were not experiencing that. However, they were also not very faithful in any of their actions either. And so their expectations of what God was going to do were completely separate from what they were doing. They just wanted God to do all this stuff for them. And I honestly think like that's typically where I am, like is if I don't see my circumstances going the way that I want them to go, then that's when it becomes easy for me to doubt God's love until I see like change in my circumstances or situation. Like one story that I was thinking about when I was putting together some of these questions was my sophomore year of college, when I really just had a difficult season of depression. I was living by myself as an RA. I am an extroverted person. I need community and people around me. And that was a really difficult time of just feeling like the Lord was just quiet and silent. And so I was like, I'm coming to you every day. I was still getting into the word every day, praying every day. So I felt like I was doing all of the things that I was supposed to do. And yet it just felt like my heart was cold. My love felt cold. and I felt like God's love was not towards me. Otherwise, I would be feeling joy, delight, all of these things, happiness, excitement. And it taught me a lot of things in that season, but frankly, that was a moment where I just kind of doubted God's love because, it was just hard. It was dark.
Yeah. So then either use the examples you guys have already talked about or maybe extrapolate to other things. So how do we respond to this doubt? So we talk about doubt. It's question, uncertainty, and we all have moments of uncertainty and times that we have questions. So when we have those moments of doubt, how should we and how could we respond?
So in the message, Liam kind of shares how when you're in that doubt, uncertainty time, you're going to either lean towards God and lean in and just like with more trust and dependence on him, or you're going to start to drift away. And so I know in my life, when there's situations I don't feel like I'm getting answers quickly or I don't understand what's going on, it is very easy for me to want to help God out and like,
It's a great way to put that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Manage it myself and be like, I know you've got other stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and work this stuff and we'll get it figured out. And then you just bless what I do. But so I will find myself trying to fix things or control or micromanage things that I have that literally all I'm doing is playing in mud because there's nothing I can actually control. Or I will lean into him and be like, okay, I know there's something you're wanting to show me in this, and there's something I need to learn in this. And so, unfortunately, I feel like for a good chunk of my life, I've done better at trying to help God out by like figuring this stuff out on my own. And then I feel like God in his grace has allowed me opportunities to continue to press in and lean, and man, it just works a lot better. So I'm hoping
I can definitely resonate with what you say. I like how you worded that. For me, I think the flip side is surrender.
Yeah.
So you said lean in. I can see that. I think for
But
me,
surrender
it's
is a
even
word I've had to use,
for me, it's being even just totally open-handed. And so yeah, no, I resonate with that for sure.
in fact, surrender has been a word I've used for like a yearly word.
Ooh,
like
nice.
it's a scary one,
Yeah, it is.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through kind of that season of depression for me. I felt like the temptation to drift, because it's like I was seeing all of these guys around me, good friends of mine, who were just flourishing in their faith and going through a tremendous amount of growth. And I was like, well, none of this is happening for me, and I'm doing the things that they're doing. So it's like, if it's not working, then the temptation was to just like, well, I'm going to just drift and do my own thing. But I just did not I did not feel like I could do that. Even despite the fact that my feelings weren't in line with what I knew to be true, I felt like the best thing that I could do is just stay close to God. So it's like, it didn't feel a lot like dependence or surrender. It felt like, I'm just going to like stay right by your side until you figure it out, until like you do something, you know? It's like, I don't know what's going to happen, but the best place for me to be is just right by you. So I'm not going to drift away because it's not going to be good over there. I'm going to just stay. Like I just kind of had this picture of myself as a little kid, just kind of like right up next to his dad's leg and just kind of staying really close. And that was just that was the only thing that I could do. And it didn't resolve itself quickly at all. It felt like it was a long season of that experience. And the Lord gradually brought me out as I learned not to trust my feelings, but to trust in God. So.
Well, the final question we have, I think, is a very fitting question to not only end the book of Malachi, I think end this series and even end our year. And so the question is, how do we cultivate soften hearts that trust God, love him, and follow him? And the reason I think it's a great fitting question is, all the stuff in the Old Testament that we see in the 10 Commandments of obey these commands, or in the minor prophets, hey, obey, care for the poor, build the temple, like all these different stuff. The underlying thing within all of it is really where's our heart with God? Like that's what God is trying to do with all of this. And then we see that fulfilled in the New Testament as well. And so all of this, it's all about our hearts. How are we having softened hearts that are aligned to trusting God, loving Him, and following Him? So as we wrap up this year, as we wrap up this series and we look to the new year, how can we cultivate softened hearts?
Yeah, I think the thing that's been on my mind, and if I am going to choose a word for the year, it's going to be the word attention. As I've been having conversations with a friend and just kind of processing the reality of one of the most important resources that I have to steward is my attention, and where I commit my mind, my focus, my energy, and wanting that attention to be on the Lord, because the quickest way for my heart to become hard, this is me personally, is to get distracted and escape in other things. Like when I get stressed or tough things are going on at work, or, finances are hard or tight. That's when it's easy for me to want to escape and run away and not give my attention to the Lord. And then it's like my ears are shut and my eyes are closed and I'm not aware of what He wants to do. So for me, what that looks like is practicing attention on Him, kind of in the way of Brother Lawrence and Practicing the Presence of God. If you guys are familiar with that book, if you're not, I think it's even free on some audio podcast to look up, like the letters that he wrote. But it's all about cultivating a pattern of attention on God's presence all the time. And I think it's remembering, like you talked about in your message, Jeremy. It's how do we cultivate a mind and a heart that remembers God all the time? Yeah, and who He is and what He's done.
In Malachi, they talk about the book of remembrance, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah, you said attention. The word that came to my mind is presence. And I think that is one of the things, even this past year, of really just what does it look like, not just to talk about God, to live for Him, to want to honor Him, but like, how do I literally walk daily with Him and just create a space for His presence to be in all aspects of my life, and to just to welcome Him into the everyday moment by moment, which then creates this ongoing dialogue throughout the day. It's just a space of hospitality for Him. But if He's the most important relationship, if He's the most important thing in my life, and yet it's like this weird distant relationship, that's not what it was intended to be. And that's not why Christ came. And that's not what God's intention was. He walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. And so for me, my heart is most soft when I'm just remembering what this is all about in the first place and having that eternal perspective, and then just letting God be a part of my everyday. And then just, it makes it sweeter going through the day, starting the day, knowing like, hey, here's some of the things we're going to be dealing with today. So help me, guide me in these moments and that stuff. But that is what keeps my heart focused and where it needs to be.
Yeah. The one word that came to my mind was a similar theme, but a little different take on it, is quiet. So between having 3 little kids, a dog sometimes too, that's not quiet, and even just a job that's busy and you're around people and active, and then you want to listen to podcasts or watch movies or sports. Like there's just constant news, there's just constant noise that we get bombarded with. And so for me, in this season, I've got to fight for quiet. And ultimately in that quiet is when I can listen and hear God's voice. So there may be other people in other seasons where quiet is not what they need. They actually need to engage and be a part of community. But I'm in a season where I got to fight for that quiet.
I love that.
Yeah. All right, guys, before we wrap up for the year, you got any final things? Amy, you got a no, but...
And I just think that this whole series has been a continual call back to God.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a better time than at the beginning of the year to recommit to walking day by day with Jesus. And I know resolutions can sometimes be cheesy or cliche or whatever, but I think we need these moments where we are reminded to remember, are reminded to reconnect and to dive back in. Don't let the guilt of past failures keep you from walking with God in the new year, and coming back to Him if you've been drifting for a while. So that's the last thing I had on my mind.
Got it.
No, that's beautiful. I love that.
Amy, I'd like for you to pray us at the end. You've been pushing our team and our church family to prayer this entire year, so I think it's only fitting that you wrap us up at the end of this year.
God, we just thank you for your just long-suffering grace for us, your mercy, your great care for us. And God, we know we are unworthy and undeserving of any of it, and yet you so badly love us and want to be in sweet fellowship with us, and you want us to turn to you. And so, God, as we lift up our church body, we just listen through these prophets, Lord. May those reminders take root in our own hearts, Lord. May we, as Liam just said, be people who are seeking you and taking this next year to really look out what does it look like to return to you, to walk daily with you, to be truly a follower of you, Christ. And God, that is our prayer as a church for each and every person that comes here, that they would not just know you, but that they would live in a way that others would be able to know you as well. And God, I just pray over our church body that you would just feel tangible through the holidays. And as we start this new year, would you, your presence just be something that we cannot deny, and that we would just walk in surrender and obedience and find the time to be in your presence, to quiet and to give you our attention. We love you, Lord. We thank you for just the many blessings and crazy cool things you have done in 2024. And we look forward to how you want to use your church for your kingdom work in 2025. We bless you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Amy, Liam, thank you. It's an honor to serve with you guys.
Yeah.
And church family, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Deeper Podcast. We're going to take a 1 week break, but we'll see you in 2 weeks. We look forward to see you next time.
2025.
2025.